Swamijis, Matadipatis, and spiritual seekers. Uh, my association with S. Krishnamurthy sir and Rukmini madam way back in 1980s. I was very young then. I used to do a lot of printing jobs for both of them. Krishnamurthy sir was a wonderful person, tall and with this distinct dress of Nehru coat. I used to call my staff also used to call him as Sir Nehru coat no banditru sir preske. And we used, and the simplicity he had. I had a very good interaction with him always. We printed a lot of books for him, and especially when he used to conduct retreats, the amount of time he used to spend, take personal interest to locate the location, which place, which premises the class should be conducted, and used to interact with the caterer, see the best food was served, and used to organize lecturers who to address the best in those times. It was amazing, and used to call personally everybody as though a invitation, as a marriage invitation to everybody, see that everybody interacts. He used to call me, and he had I was lucky, he had lot of love and affection for me. Though I was a busy person in the printing press, he used to see that he reminds me to attend the classes. First few meetings, I thought I got interested going there because of the food served. He used to take the best food available. And then after that, slowly the classes, it made me attend the class. Once in my press casually asked him, ಸರ್ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮೀಟಿಂಗಲ್ಲಿ ರಿಟ್ರೀಟಲ್ಲಿ ಊಟ ತುಂಬ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ತದೆ ಸರ್ ಅಂತ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆನಪ್ಪ ಜನ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ, ಊಟಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಬಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಲೀಲಿ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಪ್ಪ ಅಂತ ಕ್ಯಾಶುಯಲಿ ಟೋಲ್ಡ್. ಐ ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್ ಸ್ಟಿಲ್ ದಟ್. He has inspired me in a lot of ways. Because of him, at my young age, I met Professor Justice Venkatachalaya once in the retreat, Ravi Shankar Guruji. Then I had an opportunity of meeting then Governor Chaturvedi sir. This is one of the photographs I still am keeping this. We had a long interaction with then Governor Chaturvedi. It was the time some 2 new books were released. This is the photograph I have still preserved. Then my interaction with Rukmini madam, she was a very hardcore Theosophist. My father was president of Theosophical Society, had a lot of attachment for that. Every Sunday, she used to take ES classes. I never used to miss her classes. She used to do a lot of homework. Being a professor, she knew how to convey the message to the masses. Theosophy. One incident in my life I'll never forget. At the fag end of her life, she had become very fragile. But she used to come and address us. To attend in the Theosophical Society, the classes were conducted on the first floor. We used to climb about 20-25 steps. I went and I gave her a supporting hand. She refused and she said, age is only for my body, not for my soul. She climbed all the 20 steps and she addressed us for more than 1 hour. The other thing was meditation. Always in the class, she used to give a lot of importance to meditation. She used to tell, ನೀವು ಊಟ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, ತಿಂಡಿ ತಿಂತೀರಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬಾಡಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ, ಮೆಡಿಟೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಸೋಲ್ಗೋಸ್ಕರ ನೀವು ಮೆಡಿಟೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಐ ಆಮ್ ರಿಯಲಿ ಬ್ಲೆಸ್ಡ್ to be associated with both Krishnamurthy madam and Rukmini madam, and all the spiritual, they have inspired a lot of people to come into this spiritual line. And one more thing, sir was always telling, I don't have any bank account or I don't have any office bearers. This meditation and study circle should continue. Yes, J. Krishnamurti was telling, no attachments, no strings attached. He used to always tell that. And his speech were here. The way he used to speak was very impressive. And still, I remember and release their association. Once again, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Venkatesh Babuji, we are deeply grateful to you. That was indeed very authentic, very moving. The way that you have recollected some of your interactions and experiences within the span of 5 minutes, you have given us a lot about how it was valuable to you and what your feelings were towards them. So a deep, let us say, namaskar and pranams to you for your wonderful sharing, sir. Thank you so much. And we also are very grateful to all the members of Powai Forum who have joined us today for this, for Swamiji's discourse. We welcome all of you. Now Vasu will introduce Swamiji.
Namaste everyone. Namaste Swamiji. Hari Om. Warm welcome to all of you and a very warm welcome again to Swamiji. And thank you Venkatesh Babuji for your words that came from your heart. Swamiji actually needs no introduction. Swami Chidanandji is the founder of Powai Forum. Powai is an acronym for Flame of Who Am I? He is an engineer by qualification. He has done his BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering and also done his master's from IIT Madras in Electronics and Communication. After having worked in corporates and engineering college as an assistant professor and professor, his inner call took him to Swami Chinmayanandji, where he became a sannyasi and served Chinmaya mission for several decades in various capacities. Also, one of the key responsibilities he had towards the end was that he was the president of Chinmaya International Foundation in Kaladi, which he fostered and make it grow up like his own baby. Chinmaya International Foundation is a foundation from the Chinmaya mission, which promotes Indian culture, heritage from the Vedas and Upanishads. And Swamiji was instrumental in strategizing, formulating the syllabus for study for earnest seekers, and then getting it into action for implementation. And Swami Chidanandji is also a committee member at the JK Foundation in India, where he is.
That is ಶ್ರೇಷ್ಠ ಅಂತ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಅದು ಹಂಗೆ ಹೋಗಲ್ವಲ್ಲ.
Can people mute, please? Voices are being heard. And Swamiji was also an active member of the JK International Foundation, where he took part and organizes in various capacities as well. Swamiji, as a founder of Powai, has been disseminating knowledge, Vedic wisdom, Upanishadic wisdom in various circles, both in India and abroad. So he has a good following both in India and abroad, and he goes from place to place in disseminating Upanishadic knowledge. He is a very well-read person and also talks with a great deal of humility. One of the most striking things I have noticed about Swamiji is his simplicity and humility. So from that position, he speaks, though very well read, though he has done a lot of sadhana himself, there is no air of superiority when he speaks. So he's very friendly and approaches the talk and relates to all the audience as a friendly in a friendly conversation mode rather than in a lecture mode. Swamiji has been a great supporter of meditation and study circle. He has also come and delivered sessions whenever we invite him, both for sessions on Mondays or Tuesdays, or the retreat, week-long meditation retreat. Swami Chidanandji has always consented and happily agreed. And we all know how beautiful his talks have been, and he continues to inspire many of us. So with a warm welcome to Swamiji, and it's a very good, auspicious beginning to the festival of self-awareness to have such a knowledgeable and wise person as Swami Chidanandji to do the first session at the festival. So welcoming all the satsangis today, all the members of the Fawai Forum, Swami Chidanandji and Venkatesh Babuji amidst us. I would request Swamiji to address us and share his wisdom on today's topic, which is meditation, the return to the root of our being. Meditation, the return to the root of our being. Swamiji, over to you.
Yes. Namaste, everyone. I join all of you in paying homage to Sri S. Krishnamurti and Srimati Rukmini Krishnamurti, who started this meditation and study circle. I did not have the good fortune of meeting them, though in the 80s, late 80s, when I lived in Bangalore, I always saw in Deccan Herald the events today, and there is some meditation and study circle, and there is some talk by eminent scholars. I used to get excited, but I could not come face to face with those founders of this wonderful, noble enterprise. I compliment Vani and Vasudev for carrying on, carrying the torch further. And it is my good fortune to join them, and especially in this 7-evening series to mark the entering of this M&S circle into the 42nd year. As regards this evening's topic, meditation, a return to the root of our being, I seldom talk about meditation. I generally talk more about varieties of scriptural portions that reveal the nature of the self or other Vedanta topics. However, this evening we are going to consider meditation itself as the central theme. It would be most appropriate for me to say that 3 or 4 years ago, I picked up a book at the School of Ancient Wisdom. It was authored by no other than Sri S. Krishnamurti. And he wrote in that book, and I have quoted it 100 times at various places, meditation is rising vertically in consciousness. It appealed to me, and it continues to appeal to me For I truly regard all of us as essentially consciousness. But this consciousness, alas, could be very low on the vertical scale, interested in food, drink, and varieties of comforts. But through spirituality and through exercises of well informed meditation, the same consciousness can rise vertically. Therefore, with much appreciation of that definition by late Sri Krishnamurti of meditation, I now begin to share some thoughts on another way of looking at meditation, which is, as the title went, a return to the root of our being. In our country, there has been a tradition whenever a river, and for us, most of the rivers are holy rivers. Whenever a river, while it is flowing, at some point during its journey, makes a turn to such an extent that for a couple of miles, if not more, it seems to be flowing back to the very source where it started. We have built temples at that spot, and we have regarded such a spot as very, very extra sacred. Two examples are no other than Uttarakashi in Uttarakhand, where Ganga takes almost a 180-degree um, turn, and Kashi, Varanasi, where also for a short strip of its journey, Ganga turns 180 degrees. Now, this has the symbolic significance. If you and I also, during our journey through life, could return, could face to our own source, something amazing can happen. The rishis assure us will happen. Our mind has all the time two options: to go outwards and endlessly worry about things of the world and get caught in more and more details of worldly affairs. In spiritual wisdom, we never dismiss the need for having to address our own duties, but spirituality discourages us from getting caught in worldliness. As all of us know, the famous mantra in the Kathopanishad, Paranchi Khani Vitranat Swayambhu Tasmat Param Pashyati Nantaratman Kaschid Dhiraha Pratyagatmanam Aikshat Avritta Chakshuhu Amritatvamichan. As that mantra says, it is a rare one among us who turns inward wanting Amritatva, wanting immortality. This Amritatva is a very significant word. Rather than remaining alive for 200, 300 years while the body goes on getting weaker, getting older, and so on, Amritatva, immortality, is more to do with a certain touching or coming upon the eternity within us, which is always present. In our self-perception, in the way we see ourselves, one possibility is we regard our own existence as ever insecure. We could be always worried about how will tomorrow be? How will the coming years be? I am afraid I am losing my coordinates. I am losing directions. I am getting weaker. I am getting poorer. I am getting less popular, and 100 other ways in which we could be thinking. And all this is very close to one expression: oh, I am dying. There is a agonizing feeling. I am dying. In contrast, when there is the higher spiritual wisdom, there is an inner voice. I am not dying and I cannot die. And that is Amritattva. It is not the bodily immortality. Let the body die even when we are in 60s or 70s or even earlier. The death of the body in spiritual wisdom is a less important matter. Vivekananda passed away in 39 years. Many other great people lived only up to some 20s or some 30s or some 40s. But how glorious their life was. They had touched Amritattva. And many who had gone beyond 100 years of age had not touched Amritattva in any manner. So, what is this Amritattva? In our mind, in our understanding, when there is rising above body consciousness, rising above the idea that we are this personality, then it is indeed a quantum leap. In a manner of saying, it is not only this body, this personality, but this entire universe is a certain manifestation along the coordinates of space and time. Space, which is popularly expressed as X, Y, and Z. Time, expressed as T. That makes it a space-time continuum, as they call it in physics. In this space-time continuum, all phenomena are seen to take place. And this wisdom of self-awareness, M&S Circle has very appropriately named this week a festival of self-awareness. The pure self of which we are trying to have an awareness, interestingly, is untouched by space and time. Desha and Kala appear upon the pure self and disappear. The pure self is subtler than even space and time. The Rishis had said that from that Brahman arises space. So Brahman exists and existed before even space came into being. Atmanaha Akashaha Sambhutaha, says Taittiriya Upanishad. And after Akasha there came Vayu. Vayu gave rise to fire. After fire came water. After water came the earth, Panchabhutas. And then came everything else. So what was there before even space? Pure Brahman. And that is the truth, is the way Vedanta expresses it. Now, I talked about how our mind, whatever be the truth, our mind gets caught in that conceptualization of space, time, and things in space and time. Ask any young person especially, where do you want to live? They don't want to live in some peaceful, quiet area. They want to be in the heart of a big city. And you ask them, why do you want to live in the city, in a small apartment? The youngsters say, that is the happening place. Whether in India or in foreign countries, the younger generation want to be in the midst of a busy city, where late night parties also take place and they can go attend. Whereas older people want to go away from the city and they want to be in quiet residential areas. This is interesting contrast. Not that the older people have become true viraktas, detached, they are actually tired. Young people have a lot of energy and they are going to get tired one day, that is for sure. So, the world is a happening place. It is like the busy town. It is like all these metros, and a lot of things seem to be happening over there. And the Atma, our true nature, is like the peaceful suburbs, peaceful places, a lot of greenery, a lot of fresh air, maybe a stream flowing by, maybe a beautiful lake, and so on. However, the extrovert mind doesn't want all that. The extrovert mind wants to get more and more into space and time. And space and time are the warp and woof of Maya. So, this topic, a return to the root of our being, is actually a return to that truth which is before even space and time. In a Puranic story, I do not know where actually it appeared or it can be found, but this story is very popular. Devatas, gods, have a big battle with the Asuras, the demons, and the gods find it next to impossible to beat those Asuras. And in this particular story, gods do not go to Vishnu or Shiva for whatever reason. They go to Mother Kali, Mother Parvati, who assumes the form of the fierce and ferocious Kali. And Kali, granting their wish, rushes towards those demons with a sword in hand and kills all those evil forces. And she is in a tremendous momentum of going after some more demons, some more Rakshasas, some more Asuras, but pretty much all of them are finished. But her momentum is yet to subside. And that Kali is seen in some drawings, some pictures by artists, in some wall hangings, or why in many Kali temples too, in three-dimensional statues, we find Devi Kali standing with her swords, stained by blood and her tongue out. That is fine. But if you see the whole scenario, you find her standing with one foot upon the chest of no other than Bole Baba, Lord Shiva. What is going on here? Parvati, who is the wife of Lord Shiva, has her foot upon Lord Shiva's chest. Leave alone non-Hindus. Hindus also would be very confused. What's going on here and so on. But that scenario has a great connect with what we are talking. Parvati symbolically represents the mind. Our mind goes berserk. Mind goes to rajas and tamas and gets wild and achieves a lot. It is Rajasic people who do a lot of things in the world, who move mountains, necessarily or unnecessarily. That is a different issue. You find, who was that? Bernard Shaw, I think, had made a witty statement. There are two kinds of people in the world. He used some other words, but it meant one kind satisfied, peaceful, another kind dissatisfied. Having said that, Bernard Shaw adds, all progress in the world is because of the second kind, dissatisfied. They go on changing things, and that is called progress. Please take it with a grain of salt. I do admit that sometimes it is the sattvic people who do a lot more, but in a manner of saying, mind is marked by rajas and going out, the outgoing mind. Now, having accomplished her task, Mother Kali is unable to regain her own poise. And it appeared as though now, in that fury, she was going to kill even the Devatas. She can't stop. And Devatas get terribly afraid. They go to Lord Shiva and say, only you can save us now. And it is said that Lord Shiva looks at Mother Kali, who is rushing towards this spot where Devatas and Shiva are standing. She is coming towards them. And Lord Shiva says to the Devatas, don't be afraid, I will take care of it. And he goes and lies on the ground. And Mother Kali comes rushing, and she puts her one foot upon the chest of Lord Shiva. At the very touch of that, the foot touching the chest, something happens. The rest of it is all magic. Kali does not move further. She stops there and slowly she calms down. A very weird story indeed, but it has such beautiful significance. If this mind were to be brought in touch with revelations or those paragraphs, passages, mantras, or those teachings about the pure self, Shiva in this metaphor represents the pure self. Kali represents the agitated mind. You and I are agitated. That is because we are anchored in the ego. If this ego were to be brought in touch with the revelations of the pure self, Maharshi Ramana says in Saddarshanam, Ahasputam tattvamasiti vedaha tatapya samprapya paratmanishtham bhuyo vicharo mati durbalatvam tatsarvada swatmataya hi bhati. The pure self, sarvada bhati, is all the time shining in us, within us, as our true existence. And Vedaha, the sacred Vedas, aha sputam, in no uncertain terms they said, the Vedas said, Tattvamasi, oh dear, you are not this mind, you are not this ego who is in danger, you are the pure self, Tattvam Asi. Though the Vedas have said it in the loudest voice, yet if we are looking outside, we are agitated about a promotion that we missed, some praise that we narrowly missed. We are agitated about some financial loss or about our hair turning gray or our losing hair or whatever. How foolish. Maharshi says that is mati durbalatvam. You need to strengthen your mind. There is a weak mind which unnecessarily worries about frivolous things. Get back and stay as the pure self. That is our topic this evening. Return to the root of our being. We are not going somewhere else, to some unknown place where we never had been, but we are trying to return to our own natural being, something that we always were, something that we are. How interesting. Therefore, it is said, return to the root, return to your source, return to the very source of the I thought. Ahamayam kuto bhavati chinvataha ai patatyaham nija vicharanam, says Maharshi Ramana in Upadeshasara. We find that we are suffering or we are in danger. We find that we have become unpopular. Our near and dear ones are leaving us, dumping us, as the slang expression goes. There's another word, ditching us. Our beloved is ditching us. So that's how we perceive. Maharshi Ramana says, tell me once more, who is failing, who is losing, who is falling, who is in danger? And you say, well, I'm in danger. This I, which seems to be in danger, is a phantom figure. It's not true. It arises from certain truth about your existence and seek that. Aham ayam kuto bhavati iti chinvataha. If someone were to inquire, where is this, not just fear, where is the entity that has fear coming from? Where is the entity that has agitation? coming from. That entity in one word is called the self, with a lowercase s. Not capital S, but small s. The self, the ego, the little I, the aham vritti, the I thought. From where is this I thought coming? If we turn inward, that is moving towards the root of our own being. What is all this? All this seems to be hypothetical, someone says. All this seems to be just philosophy. Someone says, I don't think there is any true dimension to me. I am just this body and mind. The Vedanta patiently advises such people. Sometimes, yes, you doubt whether there is any different or another dimension to your existence. That's understandable. The noise in your mind to such an extent covers your true existence that you doubt whether the true existence is something real or a mere fiction. We say in Panchadashi, Swami Vidyaranya in the 7th chapter, Tripti Deepa, says, gives in fact an illustration. Parents sent a 8-year-old boy to a Veda Patashala. Let the boy go and learn Vedas. After 2 months, the parents felt so miserable. Our dear son, our darling son is away. We are missing him. All the more the loving mother, I guess. Either way, both of them go to that Veda Patashala. They walk 3 hours from their home to the other village where the Veda Patashala is. And as they go there, by about 9 a.m. they reach there, they actually hear Vedic chanting. A whole bunch of 40 or 50 boys in a cottage are sitting and reciting Veda mantras, which were probably taught to them that morning or for last few days. And out of respect and certain bhaya bhakti, the parents dare not enter the cottage. They are standing outside. They can't even see the boys clearly. There is some curtain and tiny holes or a net-like thing. Do not give them a clear view of those boys. As they are standing outside the Veda Patashala and they are hearing the chanting of the boys, here and there it seems to them, that is our son's voice. We are able to hear the voice of our son. They feel good. But next moment, there's so much noise, almost, cacophony as they call it. The Vedic chanting was sounding like some cacophony. They could not make head or tail of it. But here and there they would feel, there is, our son's voice can be recognized. Very next moment they are not sure. Likewise, friends, when you and I study Vedanta, at times we feel, all that I am going through is mere play of my mind. I really am okay. I am okay. But this mind goes on constructing images, new pictures, new scenarios where I have been depicted as being in trouble. Giving this illustration, Swami Vidyaranya, the author of Panchadashi, says, so is the matter with our self-inquiry or pursuit of the purest self-knowledge. So, from lack of clarity, we have to arrive at clarity. And like anything else, like in any other matter, we need to invest time, energy. Vedanta cannot be assimilated overnight, though it is finally about discovering the timeless. However, in order that we may come upon the timeless, we need to pay attention to the teachings, dwell on it, and over a length of time, we need to get down to Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Yajnavalkya says to Maitreyi in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Atmava are drashtavyaha. You have to behold your true nature. Technically, you can't behold, for the true nature is not other than you. For you to stand here and look at it, which is there, you yourself are that true nature, but in a manner of saying. Atmava are drashtavyaha. But how are we to go about it? That is where the threefold sadhana, the celebrated threefold sadhana, three-step sadhana of the Vedanta is given in the second chapter of the Bahadarnika Upanishad. Yajnavalkya Maitreyi Samvada Atmava are Shrotavyaha Mantavyaha Nididhyasitavyaha. One must listen to competent teachers who express it in right ways, who guide your thinking process along right lines, not confounding you, not confusing you, not throwing a lot of jargon upon you and leaving you in the lurch. That would be the case of incompetent teachers. 200 years after Adi Shankara moved on, there were not enough competent teachers. Therefore, a divine soul like Sri Ramanujacharya could not find sense in the Advaita Vedanta. His own teacher, Yadava Prakasha, was not at all satisfactory. And on one hand, unsatisfactory delivery or teaching of the Advaita, and on the other, Sri Ramanuja's Pura Sanskara was great love for Mahavishnu. Therefore, he put aside Advaita, but without moving too far, he created Vishishtadvaita. And another 200 years later, again because of lack of right kind of teachers, Srimad Madhvacharya felt quite uncomfortable. What is this calling everything Maya? No. Jagat Satyam, he said. And he came out with Dvaita Siddhanta, right? God and man are ever separate and so on. Let's not go to those stories, but I am emphasizing the need for proper study, and competent teachers have to guide you. If you are truly ready, as you get alert, you will actually separate the grain from the chaff. You will separate what is coherent, cogent, and sensible from what is just some jargon and some bombastic language and so on. You will know where to get going, where to go forward. So here we have the Vedas saying, do Shravana, do Manana. Now we come to the issue, what exactly is this returning to the root of our being? Of late, I have been quite impressed by a book on self-awareness, self-knowledge, or all these topics by a Westerner. Michael Singer wrote this book, The Untethered Soul. You and I, in a manner of saying, are souls, atmas, jivatmas. As jivatmas, we are tethered, we are bound, as though a rope has bound us, and at the other end of it, it is tied to a immovable pole. So we are tethered. But Vedanta is all about setting ourselves free, the untethered soul. And in his own way, and in a very elegant manner, Michael Singer talks about the beautiful teachings of the Vedanta. In fact, in one of the chapters, it begins with Ramana Maharshi and his teachings. And at a certain place, he praises the sadhana, the spiritual practice, so to say, of being the witness of all thoughts. Good or bad, can you just notice without indulging in a good thought, without resisting a bad thought, or the other way around also? Because there are some people who indulge in bad thoughts and resist a good thought. If a good thought comes to them, say, come during next week. If a bad thought comes, because of their own impurity at that point of time, they take much interest in those bad, vulgar thoughts. A joke I read years ago, probably 20 years ago, remains in my mind fresh. A Christian priest asked a parishioner, son, it was a confession session, son, do you sometimes entertain vulgar thoughts? And that member of the parish, of the church, said to the priest, the father, no, father, it's the other way around. They entertain me. So that is possible. To put it only in English, do vulgar thoughts entertain you? And this guy said, no. Do you entertain vulgar thoughts? This fellow said, no, it's the other way around. They entertain me. Anyway, coming back from humor to the serious matter, whether it's a vulgar, negative thought, depressing thought, or a noble, uplifting, elevating thought, is it possible for you to stay as the witness? Generally, we say by standing or staying as witness, what's going to happen? We must do something. You see, in hundreds of things or thousands of matters in life, yes, we have got to do things. We got to get going. We have to say something, move something from here to there. As a Subhashita goes, even the lion, the king of the forest, has to move, go from its cave hunting, so that that day's food becomes available to it. Udyamena hi siddhyanti karyani na manorathaihi nahi suptasya simhasya pravishanti mukhe mragaha. There is a Subhashita. If a lion, so powerful, no doubt, just keeps sleeping, its prey won't come and fall into its mouth. Even a lion has to go. Appreciated, accepted. We do not dispute it, but the present context is different. Michael Singer takes much pains and says in his book, The Untethered Soul, that when we are at the seat of witnessing consciousness, at the seat of witnessing consciousness, something wonderful happens. What he implies is this whole structure of thoughts, good thoughts, bad thoughts, defensive thoughts, aggressive thoughts, lazy thoughts, dynamic thoughts, and all kinds of thoughts. The entire structure, the network of thoughts, upon being just watched without doing anything. That doesn't mean you go to sleep, you are alertly watching. You don't do anything, you don't judge a thought also. Don't say this is a good thought. Aha, this is a bad thought. Oh, no comments. Quietly watching. That's how in Mundaka Upanishad you have the second bird, which is quietly watching, and the face of the second bird is radiant. Dva suparna sayuja sakhaya samana vriksham parishasva jate tayoranyaha pippalam swaduvatti anashnan anyaha abhichakashiti. Not eating, staying quiet, but abhichakashiti. The second bird shines in all glory. The first bird is your own condition when you are ignorant. The second bird is your own condition. Again, it is you only when you learn to watch. Therefore, this journey to find the root of your own being has as a major milestone learning to watch our thoughts. No wonder in today's world, especially in the West, a certain exercise called mindful living, mindfulness, has caught on fire. Even in corporate bodies, companies, they have a little time that is allowed, that is given to employees to practice mindfulness. It's a variation of attention, living in self-awareness. Whether you are eating or drinking, walking or working, singing or taking bath, can you be gently watchful? When somebody said something which was unpleasant, you get agitated and you go on analyzing what business did he have to say that? What business did she have to do that? And you start reacting. For a change, can you watch your reactions as though you are a third party? That is a major milestone if you learn to watch your reactions. Maybe that guy had no business to talk ill of you. Let it be so. We will consider it later whether he was right, he was justified, he had the authority, etc. That is a different matter. But for a little while, could you please see the way the ego in you is acting up? That is watchfulness. Sakshi bhava. Sakshi is the witness. Journey towards the root of our being is speeded up when we learn to just witness. There was a professor in Harvard University in the 1960s. He was conducting some experiments in psychedelic drugs. Then somebody said, stop all these experiments like this in laboratory, go to India, meet some yogi. They have knowledge of the mysteries of mind. So this professor, Richard Alpert, came to Nainital in Uttarakhand, somewhere I guess in 1968 or so, met an Indian yogi, Neem Karoli Baba, and rest is history. Richard Alpert did not return as Richard Alpert. Deeply touched and tremendously inspired by Neem Karoli Baba, he became a practicing Hindu. He goes back with the new name Ram Das, R-A-M-D-A-S-S. Passed away a couple of years ago. Ram Das goes back. And till his death, he was a favorite of so many people in the Western world especially, who were reading material on self-knowledge, self-inquiry, awakening, and self-knowledge, realization, etc. And one of his books that came to my hand somewhere in 1994 and really excited me a lot that time. Afterwards, I haven't read it. I'm sure it will make me happy even now. But when that book came to my hands, I really enjoyed the language, the presentation. And that book was titled The Journey of Awakening. It's not a journey from Bangalore to Kolkata. It's not a journey in time from 2010 to 2021. Not a journey in space from London to Tokyo. Not a journey in time or space. Not a journey from a position to another position. You are a senior clerk and today you are the manager of the whole department. That's the journey from one position to another. All of us know very many journeys in our life, but Ram Das titled his book, which was about self-awareness. The title he gave was The Journey of Awakening. In our dream, there is one set of space, time, objects, people, scenarios, settings. And when we wake up, all those, the place, the time, the people, the objects, the fruits and sweets and food and whole thing, lock, stock and barrel, all of them are as though just negated, dismissed. You wake up and you are sitting on your bed. Oh, was it all a dream? Yes, it was. Likewise, this ego in you and me, concerned about our tomorrow and sad about our yesterdays, but with some hope about the future, and some pleasure also about the good times we had in the past and whatnot. It is going through a dream, and this return to the root of our being is a waking up from that dream. In this whole matter, learning to stay as the witness can play a major role, but I would call meditation as something that consists of very many exercises. If somebody sits quietly and says Sri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, I would call that also a form of meditation. You are meditating on Lord Ram with the mantra, or to help you focus better, you may even sing a shloka. Apadam apahartaram dataram sarva sampadam lokabhiramam Shri Ramam bhuyo bhuyo namamyaham. In various ways, you bring the form of Lord Sri Ram. That is meditation. That cannot be put aside as some mumbo jumbo. You cannot put it aside saying it's not meditation. It is meditation of a certain kind. Meditation on some meditation with the help of some instrumental music, meditation using some Gita shlokas, some inspirational passages on some mantras, something in your own mother tongue, Telugu or Gujarati, Kannada or Bengali, whatever. You use some alambana and you meditate, because all of them are indeed an attempt on your part to calm the mind, to turn the mind inward. So in a liberal outlook, we call all of them valid forms of meditation. But this business of meditation goes to an all the more high plateau. It reaches a higher plateau when it is about discerning the ego, distinguishing the egoistic stance or position from an unbiased position of just watching. Because the ego typically has its bias, has its prejudice. The ego has a whole lot of conditioning. Who I am and who I am not, it has so much to say. Whereas this watching has nothing to say. In fact, it questions every notion of who I am. In order that we may do this, towards the end of my presentation, let me say, with my background, I feel rather convinced that the practice of meditation has to be well informed. That means study of Vedanta, spiritual study, reviewing, revising, going back to that very material. Don't say, Viveka Chodamani, I have studied in 2008 itself. Anything new you have? And so on. Your eagerness to study something new is appreciated, but it would also be very helpful for you to go back to Viveka Chodamani if you had studied it in 2008. And I assure you, if you go back to Viveka Chodamani, which you had studied 12 years ago, it will speak things which it did not those days. It will reveal secrets which were not visible or which were not available that time. Therefore, many of us who have been studying Bhagavad Gita for last 40 years or more find many times that solutions to our conflicts are in the Bhagavad Gita. I have even these days occasions where something is bothering me and then there is an insight. And then I say, isn't it what Sri Krishna says in 18th chapter? And I rush to my little copy of Gita and read, oh yeah, here he has said. Vivikta sevi ladhvashi yatavakkaya manasaha. Oh, this exactly is what I was looking for. So you find insights are in these scriptures, and not only inspirational matter, but matter or such portions of Vedanta texts, or sometimes these days audio of a great scholar, of a great pious saint, a teacher. I called them competent teachers before. So you can go back to that. And those audio talks, those texts would inform you. That's why I called it. Let your meditation be well informed meditation. Don't put all books into the some storeroom. I have read enough. Now, rest of my life, I'm going to meditate and I will not stop till I get enlightened, etc. Don't act as that kind of a hero. For however good your intentions may be, what you had read might have got forgotten. Therefore, continuously inform yourself and then meditate. Meditate, calm the mind, study, inform the mind. Let the mind be illumined by the insights, the revelations of the Vedanta material. Then again sit. In this way, Swadhyaya and Dhyana may be given more and more time and energy without being indifferent to the world, without being insensitive to anybody who is in need of something, keeping ourselves sensitive, keeping ourselves responsible, responding to true needs of our own body and mind, our own surroundings, people who are dear to us, but judiciously selecting what we ought to do and what we should not be getting into. That is Viveka. We can carry on this spiritual practice, study and meditate, meditate and study, and then a certain quiet inner change is bound to take place. Thank you all of you for this opportunity, and may this festival of self-awareness be beneficial to everyone who takes part in this festival. Compliments again to the role bearers, role holders of meditation and study circle. Congratulations to all involved in this circle. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Thank you, Swamiji, for this wonderful, enlightening discourse on the return to the root of your being, meditation. There are a few questions in the chat box.
Please read it.
I will read it out to you. Srimati Katyayini is writing, does the seat of witnessing conscience is synonymous to return to the being meditation? Does it give insights, clarity, and answers to your innate questions?
The seat of consciousness is not the same as return to the root. Michael Singer puts it this way: if you stay or if you choose to be at the seat of witnessing consciousness, that return, that journey of returning to your root gets facilitated. Return to the root of your being is a kind of a journey, though I distinguished it from journey in space or journey in time. So this return is a mysterious process that gets facilitated if we sit at the seat of witnessing consciousness, which is a picturesque and poetic way of describing being just the witness that does not judge, that takes note but does not judge. That is the thing. Therefore, a non-judgmental observation of thoughts, feelings, etc. is a great sadhana that facilitates this journey. We may say that way. Next.
That's the only question on
I
chat.
have a question, Vasudev.
Yes, please.
I'm
Please.
Janakiram Swami, sir.
Yes, yes. Namaste, Janakaramji.
No, this
Yes.
chapter 16 of Gita, the first
Ji.
3 verses give the divine qualities to be developed.
Correct.
As you rightly said, suppose we keep studying that and then try to master those qualities, some of them at least, is still
Correct.
meditation required, is my query.
Actually, if you master those qualities, meditation will be required, but when one masters those qualities without one deciding to meditate, without one planning to meditate, one gets into a meditative state. Therefore, you raised a very interesting question. It, in fact, brings to light an interesting and important dimension of this whole topic. There is one meditation which we do and another meditation which happens. So, in the context of your question, someone who has developed those qualities, Abhayam, Sattva, Samshuddhi, Jnana, Yoga, Vyavasthiti, and so on, would come to a state of mind where meditation happens. You are walking by and you see a beautiful white cloud, you may go into a meditative state. You are not planned. Therefore, to sum up my answer, your question was, should we meditate? Is there a need to meditate? No. When your Daivi Sampath is so enriched, you don't need to meditate, but who knows, you might meditate more than when you were planning and not succeeding. So it's like something like there was a teacher who decided to cut down his classes at a college where he was teaching. But he loved his students so much, even as he signed up for half pay and half workload, the department head saw that this guy was spending more hours than before. You know why? He loved his students. So when they asked questions, he would stay on in the college. And it was a joke in the college that this guy has signed for half work and half pay, but he is sitting more than full time. So your condition would be such, when you have Satya, Ahimsa, and Abhaya, and Chitta Shuddhi, etc., you may not plan to meditate. You may say, I don't need to meditate, but you will be in meditative state. So that is more beautiful, spontaneous meditation, unplanned meditation.
Thank you so much. Gave some clarity.
Welcome, Jai Janakaramji.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? We have a couple of minutes more. That 4 minutes more you can ask questions to Swamiji for any clarification. There are a lot of compliments.
Hello.
Hello. Can I ask something? Subramania?
Yes, please, but the rest of you, please mute because it will echo otherwise. Okay, Mr. Subramaya, please go ahead.
Yeah. Is this what is normally said? Meditation is not doing, but being. Is that what it means?
Yeah.
Many times it is said.
Correct. So whenever they touch upon the finer, you're right, finer dimensions of meditation, such statements are made. It's not doing, it's being. It's not doing, it's seeing. Like Sakshi Bhava, witnessing consciousness, we also said. You stay as witness. There's nothing to do. No mantra to repeat, no visualization, of course, no physical movement. One is aware. Physical movement may be there, may not be there. That's not part of the meditation. But this witnessing, so yeah, that is the significance. It is more being than doing. That's on higher stages. But on lower stages, where many of us are at this time, we need to do. We need to visualize. We need to bring a shloka, a mantra, or we need to say Om 21 times or 48 times, whatever. Again and again. Though we feel a little lazy, I think today 10 are enough. No, let's complete. If we had decided to do 21, say 21 times. Like pranayama is doing, yogasana is doing. Like that, the lower forms of meditation are beyond any doubt for any of the form of doing. But as earlier question went, either there is the tremendous enrichment of human values, satya, hinsa, daya, shaucha, and so on, or already there is such viveka and vairagya have grown to such rich measure, then there is hardly any doing. It is being, it happens.
Swamiji, there is one more question from
Yes.
Ramachandranji. Swamiji, namaskar. When we open our eyes, we see Chit. And when we close our eyes, we see Sat. Is any other meditation required other than this?
When we open our eyes, we see Chit. I do not know in what sense it is said. When we close our eyes, we see Sat. Maybe Chit means life. So we see life in all its vibrant ways. And when we close our eyes, we don't see anyone. So there is Sat, pure existence. Maybe that is what is meant. Now, my answer to the question is this. If the meditator has wonderful understanding of these two statements, when we open the eyes, it is Chit. When we close our eyes, it is Sat. There are two statements. If the meditator has a beautiful grasp of these two statements, nothing else is needed. But that's where towards the end of my talk I said our meditation has to be well informed. If the two statements someone is saying with some kind of parrot-like repetition, right? Or one at some time had an appreciation but now forgotten, only remembers the words. Like sometimes, you remember a name but wonder who it was. This name, who was this and so on. At one time you know the name as well as the person. Like that, these such statements can lose their charm at some stage. Then that is no meditation. You better review and revise and get back that understanding.
Any other questions? I think that seems to be all on the chat. I think we have listened to a true.
Hello. My name is KV Mahabala. Namaskara, Swamiji.
Yes, Mahabala, please. Yes, Mahabala, please.
Yes, I have a question. If we sit in the witness consciousness, are we in a Dvaita mode in that particular thing that I am watching something else?
Okay. Again, it is a matter of how well informed we are. If we have studied the Vedanta well, then we will not entertain that Dvaita feeling. If we have understood witnessing consciousness better, then even as we are watching, we do not make ourselves the witness with something else being the witnessed. There is just witnessing. There is observing without the creation of an observer. Because this observer, I am watching, oh, that's wonderful, I am watching it. That is also, that I am watching also is creation of thought. And such thought would not arise when we are well informed. Otherwise, everywhere, just like an immature person seeing something cannot bear his excitement and says, oh, I'm so lucky to see this. He expresses verbally. Like that, someone who is a little immature creates a picture of him being the watcher, him being the witness. So otherwise, no. As there is a more mature understanding of the Vedanta, there is just watching and no duality.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Swamiji. For me, the beginning of the discourse itself was very dramatic. Kali coming in all her fury, and then Parameshwara lying down on the ground, and she places her foot on Parameshwara and becomes absolutely quiescent and peaceful. Kali, as Swamiji said, symbolizes Prakriti, our mind. The mind which is rushing around madly everywhere, never satisfied, ever seeking happiness in things outside or in inner thoughts and feelings and experiences. As soon as it recognizes, I will not say recognize, it recognizes the absolute, the self is always there. It was always there, but we lose sight of it. So as soon as the mind consciously reconnects, it recognizes, then that is the end of the journey. That is the return to the root of the being. So this was such a dramatic entry, mind-blowing entry for me. And all the wonderful examples and stories and anecdotes that Swamiji gave, he practically provided a route map for us. He said, witnessing, alert watching is the way. All other kinds of meditation or upasana, it has its place. None of them can be sidelined. But witnessing is on a different plateau altogether. Being the subject and watching, whether it is a good thought or a bad thought is not the question. But can we rise vertically in consciousness above the thoughts and be the watcher, be the witness? And from there, we are able to reconnect to the root of our being. I think that was indeed an amazing discourse. Also, we got insights from The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. That was a great value addition also. And the way Swamiji speaks, not categorically or fanatically ruling out anything, including everything, but never deviating from the point, bringing in everything to add richness, to include everybody into the journey, at the same time, never deviating from the goal. I think it was an amazing experience, an amazing route map. And we really, really thank you, Swamiji, for this wonderful discourse. It was an inauguration of the Festival of Self-Awareness. I think a very, very apt inauguration. We could not have had a better one. And we are so grateful to you, not just for today, but for always being gracious enough to accept our invitation whenever we turn towards you. You are ready to come and share your wisdom in our forum with all our satsangis, whether it is in Kannada or English. In both, we find Swamiji is so proficient. With his scholarly background, with his deep tapasya and sadhana, I think we are truly blessed to have you with us, Swamiji. We offer our pranams, all of us, all the satsangis together, we offer our pranams to you for your wisdom and guidance. We offer our Pushpa Vrishti clap, angel showering blossoms upon the enlightened. Also for your amazing interaction and sharing. And we are very happy to welcome Dr.